Today, the 2nd of August 2026, a large piece of the European Union's AI Act became enforceable. If you read the compliance calendars written 2 years ago, you would expect the whole thing to have landed at once. It didn't. 6 days ago, a regulation almost nobody has read moved half of it 18 months into the future and left the other half exactly where it was. This is a breakdown of what actually switched on, what quietly didn't, and the one line in the amendment that makes a single day of launch timing worth 4 months. Let me start with the thing that makes this different from every other compliance deadline story, because it changed in the last week of July. The Digital Omnibus on AI is the first substantive amendment to the AI Act since it was adopted in 2024. Its own timeline is part of the story. The Council gave final approval at the end of June. It was published in the official journal on the 24th of July and entered into force on the 24th of July and entered into force on the 27th. That is, 6 days before the deadline it was written to defer. Anyone who had already built to the original date got no benefit from the relief. Anyone who stood their program down back in June on the strength of a political agreement was, on a strict reading, exposed in the meantime, because until publication, the law still pointed at the 2nd of August. Here is what moved. The high-risk regime, that's hiring, credit scoring, education, essential public services, law enforcement, migration, administration of justice, was deferred in two tranches. Standalone systems under Annex 3 go from this August to December 2027. AI embedded in regulated products goes from 2028. The stated reason is readiness. The harmonized standards those rules are measured against do not exist yet, and requiring conformity with standards that haven't been written isn't workable. But look at the third route. Article 50 was deliberately left alone. 4 transparency duties are enforceable as of today. 1. Any AI system intended to interact directly with a person has to disclose that it's an AI. 2. Providers of systems that generate synthetic audio, image, video, or text must mark those outputs in a machine-readable format that's detectable as artificially generated. 3. Deployers of emotion recognition or biometric categorization have to tell the people exposed to it. And 4. Deployers must disclose deepfakes and must disclose AI-generated text published to inform the public on matters of public interest. All of it has to be cleared, distinguishable, and delivered no later than the first interaction or exposure. Now, here's the line in the amendment that I think matters most, and I haven't seen anyone lead with it. The machine-readable marking obligation got a 4 month transitional period out to the 2nd of December, but only for systems already placed on the EU market before today. Anything placed on the market on or after the 2nd of August complies immediately, with no transition at all. Sit with the size of that. 2 identical products, same architecture, same outputs, same provider. One shipped into Europe on the 1st of August and has until December to build watermarking. The other shipped on the 2nd and needed it working at launch. There is no partial credit and no phase-in. A single day of launch timing is worth a 4 month runway. And this is in a checkbox. For images and audio, there are workable approaches. For text, it is materially harder. A short output simply doesn't have much room to carry a signal that survives editing, and paraphrasing degrades whatever you do in bed. The act itself concedes the point. The duty is qualified with the words, as far as this is technically feasible, taking into account cost and the state of the art. No harmonized standard exists. The AI Office has published a code of practice on marking AI-generated content, and it is voluntary. So the incentive to land on the early side of that boundary wasn't cynicism. It was the difference between shipping a mature implementation and a rushed one. I'd caution against reading specific launches as timed around this. What can be said is narrower. The regulation created a sharp 4 month incentive attached to one date, using an instrument that became law 6 days before it. Now, the piece that matters most if you publish anything. Article 50, paragraph 4 says, deployers of a system that generates or manipulates text published to inform the public on matters of public interest must disclose that. Most of the coverage stops there and reports a blanket labeling duty on AI-assisted journalism, but the provision continues. The obligation does not apply where the content has undergone a process of human review or editorial control, and where a natural or legal person holds editorial responsibility for the publication, both limbs together. So the test is not whether AI was involved, it's whether an identifiable human or entity answers for what went out. That makes sense once you see what the rule is protecting against. The mischief isn't machine assistance in writing, it's unaccountable machine output entering public discourse with nobody answerable for it. A newsroom that drafts with AI, edits with humans, and publishes under a masthead with a responsible editor hasn't created that problem. A reader with a complaint has someone to complain to. An automated pipeline publishing unreviewed output under nobody's name has created exactly that problem, which tells you what a weak position looks like, a review step nobody is able to decline, a reviewer with no capacity to evaluate what they're approving, a generic disclaimer with no named person, or a review that happens after publication. And what a strong one looks like, a named editor with genuine authority to reject, substantive checking, and a record you could put in front of a regulator. The exception is only worth what you can evidence. On penalties, transparency breaches sit in the middle band, up to 15 million euros or 3% of total worldwide annual turnover, whichever is higher, with the caps inverted for small and medium businesses, so the lower of the two applies. That's not the top tier. 7% is reserved for the outright prohibited practices. But don't read the lower band as lower stakes, for one specific reason. Whether a system counts as high risk is arguable. Whether your chatbot told the user it was a bot is a screenshot. Transparency breaches are unusually cheap for anyone outside your company to evidence, and under Article 85, any person can lodge a complaint with a market surveillance authority. One correction worth making, because it's widely misreported. Today is not the day general purpose AI became regulated in Europe. The obligations on providers of general purpose models have applied since the 2nd of August 2025, a year ago. What arrived today is the machinery to enforce them. The Commission's powers to request documentation to conduct evaluations of a model and to require measures, which extends as far as restricting availability, withdrawal, or recall. The obligations are a year old. The regulator just got its instruments. So, practically, first, work out whether you're a provider or a deployer and do it per system, not per company. Paragraphs 1 and 2 land on providers, 3 and 4 on deployers, and a great many compliance plans start by solving the wrong half. Second, check whether any paragraph reaches you at all. Most organizations will find 2 of the 4 don't. Third, do the cheap things today. A plain AI disclosure visible at first interaction, not buried in terms of service. Check it meets accessibility requirements, and name a person or entity with editorial responsibility for anything you publish. That last one costs nothing, and it's the anchor of the exception. And fourth, the step everyone skips. Nearly every judgment in Article 50 is a contextual standard with no harmonized guidance behind it. Was the AI interaction obvious to a reasonably well-informed observer? Did the system substantially alter the semantics of the input? Did your review amount to editorial control? Was your marking as robust as technically feasible? All 4 are arguable both ways today, and they'll be settled by enforcement over years, not by reading the text, which means a documented, reasoned decision made in good faith is a fundamentally different posture from an undocumented one, even if a regulator eventually disagrees with it. 1 page per system, what it is, provider or deployer, which paragraphs engage, which exceptions you rely on and why, and the date you decide it. So that's the brief. Article 50 is in force, the high risk half is not, and the thing to write down this week is you're placed on the market date, because that one fact decides whether you had 4 months or none. The full analysis, with every clause quoted and linked, is at article50.no5.gov.com. And if the useful part of this was the method reading the amendment rather than the headline, finding the exception that decides whether the rule even reaches you, that's what we do every week inside the Hidden State Drift Mastermind. $105 a month for practitioners rather than spectators. HiddenStateDrift.com. This is analysis, not legal advice. Thanks for watching.